The U.S. bombed Iran. What's the IT blast radius? You're watching Techstrong, gang. Hey, everyone. Happy Tuesday. You know, for those of you who don't know, we record these shows one day in advance, but what a difference a day makes, right? We recorded on Friday. It was a very different sort of reality. Now here we are recording this show Monday for Tuesday, and everything we said on Friday, at least geopolitically, might have gone out the window. But as we sit here Tuesday, I can't tell you what's going to happen tonight or Wednesday. Every night is, I try to get up in the middle of the night and check my news sources to see what's going on over in the Middle East. But it's certainly been a memorable weekend. Lot going on. You don't come to us for your news like that, but let's jump into the IT of it. We've got a great gang we're going to talk about. You know most of these people, so I'm not going to go through a whole thing. We're going to try to get right to the news today. But let me quickly say, we have on the gang today the one and only Kimberly Bates, JP Morgenthal, Stephen Foskett, the Dean Mike Vizard, Bonnie Schneider, and myself.
Am I the only one that has flashbacks of Hollywood Squares when you do that?
Kind
in
of.
the little corner.
So here's the real question. Are you Paul Lynde or Charlie Weaver or...
No, I'm not Paul Lynde. No.
I love your little Paul Lynde.
But then who's Charles Nelson Riley, right?
Charles Nelson Riley. There Joanne Worley. There were some great people on there. But anyway, hey, I'm trying to get right to the news today. Mike, IT blast radius, what do we got?
So I think everybody's on knife's edge, kind of waiting to see what happens here. I think we're all collectively hoping for the best and maybe starting to think about preparing for the worst. And you have an article over on techstrong.it, Alan, talking about some of the concerns ranging from, will there be, budget freezes on IT to what are the cybersecurity implications? But let's start off with you. And there just seems to be a lot at stake here, a lot more than 48 hours ago, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah. So, do check out my article on techstrong.it on this. Generally speaking, there are some people who make a lot of money during war, and there's some people who lose a lot, and not just money during war, right? War is not healthy for animals, pets, and other animals, children, and other living things. And so I'm trying to remember that from when I was 8 or 9, growing up in the Vietnam War era. But, generally speaking, when there's chaos in the world, people try to, they get tight. And IT budgets generally get tight. And so you might expect to see some of that as a result of recent events. However, as I wrote in my article, I think with this particular, the particulars of the Iran-Israeli-U.S. triangle, unless someone else gets involved, what we're seeing is not so much a pullback of IT budgets, but maybe reallocations of IT budgets, right? We could talk specifically about cyber, but when you've got 3 of the world's preeminent cyber warfare countries involved here, and make no mistake, Israel, well, the U.S. is in a class by itself, and Israel's probably close behind, and Iran is no slouch, right? You got to expect that there will be cyber repercussions here, and cyber fallout, and cyber attacks. So as Jen, is it Pataki? Jen Easterly, former CISA person, wrote on LinkedIn this week, hey, shields up. Shields up. Now is the time to put on your maximum cyber type of defenses. And that may mean spending a little bit more money immediately, getting, whether it's manpower, SaaS-based services, whatever. But now's the time to burst up your cyber defenses, because stuff's going to happen. I can pretty much tell you. On top of that, I think this is also going to give rise to a big IT sovereignty push. We've been talking a lot about IT sovereignty over the last couple of weeks, few months, but this is going to really put some rocket fuel in the tank, right? You don't want your people stuck in a country where the airspace is shut down. You certainly don't want your data stuck in an infrastructure or internet or hosting where it's been shut down or not available to you. So I think IT sovereignty projects, obviously cybersecurity projects, and then everything seems to benefit AI, doesn't it? A lot of people will say, hey, we need to be able to do more with less. We might have less people. We need to have more automation. And so I think you'll see an increased push into AI, accelerating what we already have on the board. So overall, I don't think budgets will be frozen. I think budgets will be reallocated. It's a tremendous time for more digital transformation. But those three areas that I mentioned, and I mentioned them in the article, are prime for from spending and for activity.
Kimberly, do you think that sovereign clouds will get a big boost? I mean, we've already seen a lot of countries who are normally allies of the United States saying we had nothing to do with this, so they're already kind of positioning themselves accordingly. But will that get extended out to where workloads are placed?
I think that's just going to continue. I don't think it's, we're already on that march. I mean, it's a fait accompli, in my opinion, with countries creating their own sovereignty environment and wanting the data there. And that goes even beyond this blast, that we're in the middle or potential war. It goes into all the geopolitical, who owns my data, I am in ownership of it. I think the biggest issue here is the cybersecurity, because if you want to attack and not be seen as directly attacking America, which is, where the threat of the president has been saying, don't attack, our soldiers, don't attack America. That's the way to go. In some way and somehow we are exposed. Many of our infrastructure areas are probably exposed and they don't even know it. They still have the password of 123 admin or something along those lines. And so Jen Easterly's post that if you haven't read it, she did a great job on a short piece that was up on LinkedIn that I reposted from her. Very good, marching it down that every cybersecurity CIO, executive needs to go and check their list about where they're at, and then probably do, if they haven't done it recently, probably do a tabletop exercise about where they're at. I mean, it's really because that's, they've been known to attack that way, and we've attacked them that way. So we've got, sandworm and all that kind of stuff, the history of that. So I'll pass on.
Stephen, is the thing that we used to call the cloud devolving into essentially managed hosting 2.0? I mean, it feels like we're just getting smaller and smaller, and the clouds are becoming more disaggregated. So I don't know, is there a fundamental change in the way we think about IT architecture afoot?
Well, it's interesting that to consider the cyber implications. Of course, when people are dying, it's sometimes difficult to think about, the implications on business. But I guess if we want to talk about that, if we want to figure out how this works, I think we need to think about how all of this impacts everything that we do on a daily basis. So certainly, to your point on the architecture and the design of the global infrastructure that we're deploying, we cannot, as IT pros, pretend that what we do isn't impacted by global events. As you all mentioned just now, the involvement of the U.S. in the attack in Iran, the denial of involvement from other countries, specifically Europe and Australia, the concern over these state-sponsored threat groups. As Camberly pointed out, it is very obvious that these threat groups, that's going to be the vector they're going to use to strike back. It seems very obvious to me because what we've taught the world over the last couple of decades of doing essentially nothing about these advanced persistent threats, at least nothing on a diplomatic front, is that you can attack us and not expect any kind of response. And so Iranian threat groups, so they've got APT 3334, which is probably the same group, which has the charming name of Helix Kitten, and APT 35, which is the charming kitten. 3334 targets infrastructure elements. 35 has generally targeted businesses, including the famous election interference, the HBO cyber attack, that sort of thing. I think that we'll definitely see both of these threat groups active going forward, where they're trying to figure out ways of inflicting some damage on the West, generally, the United States specifically. I know that Israel has been actively under attack for the entire time of the operation since October 7th, but and of course before that as well. So yeah, I think that all of us, we need to recognize, as Kimberly said, that they're coming for us. They're coming for all of us, and it's going to affect the way that we deploy applications, where we deploy those applications, what we can expect from them. And I think it highlights the questions that we've had previously about sovereignty, data sovereignty, and cloud sovereignty. We have to think about, where are we deploying applications, and what is the geopolitical implication of that?
So I just would add to that, though. Yes, we've got to be wary and put our defenses on high alert, DEFCON 5 or whatever. But let's not forget offensive cyber capabilities that have been put into play here. Right? And I'm going to give you two quick examples. One is Israeli, right? Many folks in Tehran and Iran have said that their internet has been shut down. Now, there's conflicting reports. I've seen reports that it was, Israel that shut down Iran's cyber. They've cyber attacked and shut down their internet for periods of time. I've seen other reports that it was the Iranian government themselves that have shut down the internet so that voices of dissent can't take advantage of the situation in terms of regime change or gathering support, or as well as giving out potentially strategic information about where attacks have been, how effective they've been, and so forth. But Israel is an offensive cyber powerhouse. And quite frankly, so is the U.S. We have a cyber command. We have the USA. Don't think for a second that as part of this attack over the weekend, that cyber assets were not put into play to suppress Iranian communications, because at some level, the internet's communications, right? And this is a game as old as humans. When you're attacking, you want to suppress communications of the enemies, of your enemy. So I am more than sure that as part of this attack package, besides the B-2s and everything else, the cruise missiles and everything that came with it, there was a cyber blackout zone that we laid down there to thwart command and control at the time of the attack. Offensive cyber.
Yeah, and we seem, we've heard explicitly in the press conference after this attack some of the tactics that they used militarily. They were using, it seems, air-launched decoy drones that are designed to emulate other types of aircraft. Those of us in the hobbyist area, I am an ADS-B hobbyist. I have an ADS-B radio receiver in the roof of this building, actually. And we were all used as well as part of the ruse, because the ADS-B network, they openly broadcast that a bunch of B-2s were heading west from Missouri. They openly broadcast that, and all of the enthusiasts were able to see those bombers taking off and heading west. on Saturday in the Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, I think a lot of us were like, "Hey, what's going on? Why are all these bombers taking off?" We were also seeing a whole bunch of refueling tankers taking off from bases all over the United States. It was a really interesting situation because essentially, rather than having these hobbyists snoop in on activities that they're not supposed to see, they used these hobbyists as a way to broadcast a decoy mission going in the opposite direction of the actual bombing group, which headed east. And certainly, I think that we saw some of this cyber operation. I think we're still in the early stages of figuring out what was cyber and what was not. But as you point out with Iran and their internet going down, I doubt it was the entire country being shut down by their own government. I have a suspicion that the U.S. was involved in that too.
So, Stephen, I appreciate. I love the fact that you were involved with this.
Yes, unfortunately, I was used by this.
I was fooled by the use as well, because I saw that post up there when it's like, wow, this is shocking. I think I brought this up several times because our utilities, state and local governments, have very often, or particularly state and local governments, very often have been underfunded with how they, with their IT organizations, money goes elsewhere, et cetera. And for that reason, those are the areas that are probably most at risk. And since they own a lot of the utilities, I think about here in Boulder, the utility they don't own the electricity, but they do own the water system. And so you question and ask, okay, so how much are they doing there? What are we doing in terms of hardening those areas? And the other piece of it is that their groups, their gangs that they have, the kittens, they have running around all over the place.
Why does it have to be kittens?
I don't know why it has to be kittens, but the kittens that are running around, anticipating that they have been worming their way into our systems. And whether or not they want to start flipping the switches now, that's going to be, there's the option. So
if not now, when?
Right. If you're not going to do it now, when are you going to do it? Because, the regime change, well, don't say that. That's
anyone who's ever watched a Star Trek episode, right, knows that before you attack, you raise shields. And I don't know, but it seems to me lately that, this administration decided, let's go into battle and we'll keep shields low so that it costs less money and we, it's not as expensive. So I just, it's that feeling of like every other time we've ever gone into any conflict anywhere, right? Cyber defense was a critical factor and, confirmed and managed appropriately. And in this particular situation, it seems almost like, nothing's going to happen.
Well, maybe they didn't want to alert them by putting it. But here's the fact. It's not just state and local governments or critical infrastructure. Yes, critical infrastructure will absolutely be a target. But what a lot of the Iranian hacktivist type of activity is more about sowing chaos, discord, aggravation, attacking healthcare kind of things, trying to bring down a healthcare network. Just like not just what you would think of as your typical public utilities, critical infrastructure. They want to just create chaos and havoc and annoyance, if you will, even. But you know what, JP? I hear where you're coming from, and you think about, what were the real goals of this U.S. venture? Were they accomplished? What will be the fallout? And we could debate that on the political spectrum all till the cows come home. But I gotta believe that there are some smart people in the government who either before this or as soon as it was announced went to DEFCON 5 or whatever the level of preparedness is and we're on this. I mean, it would boggle my mind if
We've
we
lost
didn't.
a lot of good people in the government.
I know we have
Um,
Jen Easterly being one of them. And Chris Krebs another. But there's still good people there, and the NSA are not sleeping at the wheel. So, and I think
the
Cyber
other
Command.
thing I think that we need to be wary of is sponsored terrorist organizations
Yes.
by Iran. It's not just Iran that is likely to operate. And in fact, if I were Iran, I certainly would play a little bit of Don Corleone here, and my hands are clean. I didn't do anything, right?
No, I think you're absolutely going to see the Houthis and the groups in Iraq, right? Because for all intents and purposes, for the billions of dollars we spent in Iraq, ridding them of Saddam Hussein, it's become somewhat of a proxy state for Iran. And these private militias and so forth, the Shia militias there, I think they represent the biggest threat, especially to U.S. troops who are in bases throughout the Middle East. So that will remain to be seen. Anyway, though, it is one last aspect, and we don't have a lot of time I wanted to cover, was the technology for the actual attack itself. You could say what you want about America, but we make a damn good weapon. No one does weapons better than America. No one does these kinds of bombs with stealth bombers. And you know what? Even with the current F-troop in charge of the Pentagon and everything, it was as near as can be told a flawless execution here with top flight technology. And we could probably do a whole segment on that the tech involved, whether it be the GPS and the bombs and nary a shot was fired at these planes from what's been said. So kudos to American technology, especially when it comes to making weapons. We may not make the best cars in the world anymore, but goddamn, we make the best weapons. All right, let's take a break here at Tech Strong Gang. We'll come back and talk about an AI land grab.